Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and I'm delighted to be joined for this episode of Harmonious World by David Lefkowitz, who is a very well respected contemporary composer. And he has just released his Preludes and Fugues in two books, with book one called Expanded Universe and book two, Parallel Universes. Each one of these books contains 13 preludes and fugues performed by four of the leading new pianists. And we'll be talking about who they are and what they got up to and how the recording process happened and all this sort of stuff. It's really fine, modern piano music, played extraordinarily well. What you're listening to now is from book one, Prelude and Fugue number 13. It's a fabulous little piece. So I hope you enjoy listening to my conversation with David Lefkowitz. Hello.
Hi, good evening.
Hey. Yes, thank you, David. I know it's morning for you.
It is late morning.
Yes, yeah. But thank you for sparing time for this episode of Harmonious World. I'm really grateful.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me, and a pleasure to
Lovely.
meet you.
Yeah. Well, this is a very, very exciting project. So you've composed all of this and you performed some of it, a
A
little
tiny
bit.
bit of it.
But yeah, so there's a lot to talk about. I want to start with the fact that Preludes and Fugues, so this is 26 Preludes and Fugues arranged in two books. And I want you to explain to me why the Prelude and Fugue form really appealed to you.
Well, so Bach was not the first person to have written Preludes and Fugues, but he wrote a set of 48, or I should say two sets of 24 each, which really standardized that Prelude and Fugue pairing as a thing. And since then, composers from Mendelssohn through Shostakovich, a whole bunch of Russian composers, Rachmaninoff, have imitated it. And it's, I mean, if a fugue has been a form that musicians have had to cut their teeth on forever, because there's rules, but there's also musicality, and how can you create music within the structure of those rules? The prelude and the fugue is a way to be a little bit more musical and a little bit less rule oriented. So the prelude says, "Here's the world I'm going to inhabit," and the prelude says, "Here's how I'm going to inhabit it with those rules that you know from that other world." And whatever world that could be, it could be a key, it could be a mood, it could be um, a strange mode, it could be world music. Um, I am very interested in exploring different worlds. In fact, that's really, I'd say, most of what I do as a composer. So this idea of saying I'm exploring a world and here I am importing rules into this world, or you could say looking at those rules of fugue writing from Bach through the filter of the New World. So this really appealed to me. I never really wrote a fugue until I started this project. So I was in my mid to late 50s. I had written one as a student, or maybe two. Um, a fair amount of my music is sort of fugue-like in retrospect, although it doesn't follow the strict rules of fugue, and I never thought of it as fugue. So this was really my first endeavor, and I entered it with some. I embarked on this endeavor with some trepidation, but once I was in it, I flew.
Right. And the thing I like about the Prelude and Fugue form is if you don't like this one, there'll be another one along in a minute.
Exactly. Exactly right.
And I think that's one of the joys of this, 13 in book one and then 13 in book two. And they all have a different character. They all, each the prelude and then the fugue that follows has that, their brother and sister, if you like. But then you go over to a different, completely different part of the world or different time zone or something for the next one, which I find fascinating. And like you say, there are all these rules about what you must do in a prelude in the following fugue and that sort of thing. But actually, it's like George Orwell used to say about writing. Here are the 10 rules that you should follow, and the number 10 is break all the rules.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the things that I did a lot in the first book was to create new modes or scales. And I created a bunch of new scales and loved them, explored them, and wrote music in them. And then I started to run out of ideas originally for how to create the next mode. So I did a little bit of research on the internet, um, alternate modes or other scales. And I came across some website that said a scale is 7 notes with the eighth note repeating at an octave. And I thought, who says? There's a rule that I wanted to break. So even at the most basic, I followed Orwell's 10th rule a lot.
Fantastic. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about music that is of its time. Bach was definitely of his time. Mozart was of his time. Beethoven, all of the greats were music of their time. And I'm sure there were lots of people who went, "Oh, I don't like this modern music that Beethoven is playing or whatever." you know and I think that the same is true of modern classical contemporary classical music now today. You can break those rules and you can live by them or die by them or whatever you want because it's up to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Beethoven. Beethoven had these 48 preludes and fugues by Bach on his piano. And there is scarcely a significant piece of music that he wrote that doesn't have a fugue in it. He was thinking about Bach all the time. He was in awe of that set of 48. But Bach, who wrote these in, say, around 1716 to 1724, thereabouts, um, it was new territory at that time as well. Tonality had been around for about 100 years, but he was really one of the leading forces in sort of codifying what tonality is. So the thing that we think of as eternal was actively being created by Bach at that time.
Yeah. And he wrote a lot of the rules, didn't he? Just as
Exactly.
he broke them, but he, there's a reason why we're still studying Bach, just as there's a reason why we're still studying Shakespeare.
Exactly right.
Yeah, yeah. So you've got 26 preludes and fugues played by four different pianists. Now, why did you choose those pianists?
Well, I started with my colleague David Kaplan, who's a fantastic young pianist. I wouldn't say that he specializes in new music, but he plays quite a bit of new music, but he plays music from all eras. Um, he plays music from the 16th through the 21st century and is comfortable with all different styles. Um, and I knew that I wanted to work with him, so I presented him with this music, and I said, "Can we record this?" Well, this is about 170 minutes of music, so just shy of 3 hours. And he said, "We're going to have to share this," which was actually my plan all along. Um, he said, "Well, I know he is one of the founders of an ensemble called Dakota, which is a new music ensemble based in New York." He said, "I know these other pianists through Dakota. How about we work with them?" And I thought that was great. This would be like Dakota plays Lefkowitz. It turns out in the end that he is the only one who is officially affiliated with Dakota. Um, but these pianists were really amazing. One of them I knew slightly from prior to the recording. One of them is just this technical master. I can give him the most difficult music and he can sight read it. And he's
Wow.
completely self-effacing. He says, "Yeah, I played it. It's okay, no problem." Um, and the fourth one, so I knew Mika Sasaki, who plays just beautifully. David Kaplan also plays beautifully. Steve Beck is the wizard, and then Michael Mizrahi, his background is very similar to mine, and he knew exactly what I was after in so much of the music that he played.
And they do just bring it all together, don't they? They just bring your music to life, I think.
They really do.
Yeah. Right. So there is also Cantor Marcus Feldman. How did that using a voice come about?
So the first book, as I said, mostly explores all these different scales, but it is about the piano. So I start with this phrase, preludes and fugues in various keys for piano. And in the first book, I question the idea of prelude. I definitely question the idea of fugue, and I most definitely question the idea of various keys. I didn't question the idea of piano. The second book, I said, well, I wrote the first book and I said, wow, this was great. I love it. Now what? And I thought, I haven't questioned the idea of piano. This was still during COVID. The project started just as COVID was beginning. But we were still under COVID lockdown or restrictions as I was gearing up to write the second book. So I was home almost all the time, looking at the piano I'm looking at right now, my 1916 Steinway piano. And I started putting, I was going to use an expletive, stuff into the strings. Chopsticks, golf tees, screws, um, pull chains for a lamp, drum snares, decks of cards, erasers. And I spent something like 6 months basically researching the prepared piano, which is not a completely new idea. John Cage did it. My teacher, George Crumb, did it. Those two are probably the most famous for having written prepared piano pieces. I had done a little bit of inside the piano playing. You touch the string here, you pluck the string that way, but I had never prepared the piano. So I just dove in, everything but the kitchen sink. The kitchen sink was a little bit too big. Um, so really questioning the idea of what is the piano, I said, well, preludes and fugues for piano don't have to be only piano. So the very first prelude and fugue from the second book includes whistling, and that was one of my contributions. At the end of the 12th fugue, a second pianist is added, and that's me contributing just a little bass line. And then the final one, the 13th, is for two pianos. But along the way, there's all these other things that come in. So I threw in voice. I was hoping that the vocal part could be sung by the pianist, but that didn't quite work.
Right.
So I got my friend the cantor.
And it just adds something actually quite surprising.
It
You
is
suddenly go,
surprising.
oh, hello. There's something else going on here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I've listened to this so many times all the way through, and when I get there, I do exactly that. I say, "Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I did."
Yeah. Yeah. It's brilliant. It's really good. So at this point in the podcast, I would like to play the beginning and a little bit, a clip from Prelude number 7, the Funk Prelude from Book
Okay.
2. you get your funk on. So how did that start? What made you get that groove going?
Well, I guess I should tell you a little bit about my background, my
Yeah.
musical childhood. I started playing clarinet when I was 8, added piano when I was 10, but dropped piano when I was 14. I decided I wanted to play bassoon. My mother said, okay, we'll give you lessons on 2 instruments. We're not going to give you lessons on 3. So I dropped piano for bassoon. Um, Towards the end of high school, I added flute, saxophone. I became a woodwind player. But when I got to college, I tried out for the orchestra. I said, I'm here to try out on clarinet. And the director said, I see you play bassoon. I said, yes, but I'm here to try out on clarinet. He said, but you play bassoon. And you see where this goes. So
Yeah.
sort of the end of my life as a woodwind player. But also right around that same time, towards the end of high school, beginning of college, I was really getting interested in jazz, and I tried to improvise, and I couldn't. And part of it was clarinet is a little bit of an awkward instrument to improvise on, and I wasn't good enough on saxophone to improvise. So I tried to do it on piano, but my chops were definitely not good enough. So I was walking around school just thinking about these improvisations that I had in my mind, but they took so much time to develop. Basically, I came to the realization that what I wanted to do was compose. I wanted to improvise, but not in real time because I couldn't do it. So for a long time, a lot of my music was jazz-ish, jazzy, jazz-oriented. Um, my compositions were sort of improvisations worked out slowly, note by note. Um, so the part of my core is jazz. I hadn't visited it for, I don't know, 20 years, but it's always in there. If I'm not listening to Bach, the first thing that I listen to is jazz,
Right.
uh, a little bit of Miles Davis. Um, so the second book, all of the pieces really emerge from the preparations. And one of the preparations that just astounded me, insert an eraser between the strings in just the right way. And these are accidents. These are definitely accidents. And I don't know that I could repeat them now. But if you insert it the right way, you'll get this dong, dong, with a little bit of a pitch bend. Doi.
Yeah.
And that just sent me off in directions of jazz. So in the funk prelude and fugue, the high notes are basically percussive, then they become xylophonic, then marimba, then piano, and then string bass. So it's sort of like in one instrument, I've got a jazz quartet.
Yeah. And it is a lovely piece. I really like that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you were talking about writing this sort of towards the end of lockdown. What I'm fascinated by is how did you decide which of the four pianists was going to play each
Hmm.
of the pieces?
Well, I knew something about their strengths and I don't want to say weaknesses because I don't actually know that they have too many weaknesses. I definitely knew something about their strengths. Um, Mika Sasaki, as I mentioned, I knew her previously, and I just knew how beautiful her playing is. So I gave her some of the pieces that I consider the most gorgeous. Um, I love listening to her play my Prelude and Fugue number two. In fact, she plays Prelude and Fugue number two from both book one and book two, and I just think that it's gorgeous. I love hearing her play those. Um, Prelude and Fugue number eight from book two is one of my two klezmer pieces, so I gave that to Michael Mizrahi. Um, Prelude and Fugue number eight from book one, it starts out with this long Messiaen-like prelude that is a little bit tricky, but it's not technically demanding. But the following fugue is really difficult. So I said, Steve Beck can play this pretty much at sight, and that's pretty much what he did. No, I mean, he practiced, but I remember I set aside an hour and a half or two for recording of each prelude and fugue, taking into account how long each piece was, how difficult it was, how many takes I thought we would need. And on the first day, he recorded one or two pieces, and we were done in something like 45 minutes. And I turned to the next pianist who was just hanging out, waiting to play. I said, I think we'll be starting early.
Yeah. Excellent.
Um, and David Kaplan, the pianist, my colleague, who with whom this started, I had already dedicated a pair of pieces to him. So I gave him those, and I gave him the others that I thought would suit his personality.
Right. And I think that that feels like the right thing, doesn't it? It feels like they speak to you about who needs to play them.
Exactly.
Which brings me to the next thing, which is, so have you published these as pieces that other people can perform? And would you like to see, other pianists performing them?
I would love to see other pianists perform them. They are self-published, which is not the um, not the rule these days, but I would say that a majority of composers self-publish now. Music is sold as PDFs, and so
Yeah.
uh, publishing itself is sort of defunct. Um, so I self-publish it, and it's available from me directly. I would love to see them perform it. It does not need to be performed as an entire book, let alone two books.
Right.
Um, and some of the prepared piano pieces can be performed unprepared as well.
Right, because I've spoken to a couple of pianists who use prepared piano, and you talked earlier about the sort of randomness of, where something goes, how it falls, and actually, in some ways, it comes back to that improvisatory feel, doesn't it? That actually, if it's in a slightly different way, then that's okay.
Right, exactly. Well, there's some like the funk one, which would sound different every time you play it. It would sound different every time you prepare a different piano, but that has to be performed on a prepared piano. The one that's most fun, I think, is the Prelude and Fugue number two that Miko Sasaki played, which has chopsticks stuck into the strings. Um, and it's sort of a joke. I wrote this highly constructed piece with these three note and four note sets, and I manipulate them and I turn them upside down and play them backwards. And once you play them on the prepared piano, those sets are completely unrecognizable because the chopsticks disguise the pitches. They change the notes and
Right.
the notes in unpredictable ways. So that can be played without the preparations, and then it is this highly constructed piece of music with three and four note sets. But with the chopsticks, it has this Chinese bell quality, which was the intention. So really, I've got kind of like two pieces in one.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for talking to me about this album because it's just wonderful, and I hope people will listen to more of it because it's just modern music that's not scary, and I like that.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. And
Thank
I
you.
if I can just add, modern music that's not scary, that's one of my goals in life. So I really appreciate that.
Good, excellent, brilliant. Okay, well, thank you for joining me, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me for that fascinating conversation with David Lefkowitz about his Preludes and Fugues for piano. What you're listening to now is Fugue number 13, the Fugue. So this is the final piece of Book 2, Chaconne and Triple Fugue. I love this modern music that isn't scary. And I think David and I agree on that. But thank you for joining me once more for Harmonious World. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.